give it a second. All right, it says the event is starting. Okay, and I believe we are live.
I think we are. Yeah. Woo. Good picture.
It says we are. It says we're streaming live right now.
Well, I'm not streaming because I got some goofy face.
Let's see. All right, 1 second here. It says we've been live for 20 seconds. Stream health is good. Let me click this. Okay, yeah, we are live. All right, so
really?
It is streaming. Yeah, it is streaming. If you actually go to the live event, you'll see it right there. All right, so... All right, guys, so welcome to this live AMA. For those who don't know me, my name is John Weinberger, and I am an Authorized Unity Instructor for the Ultimate Guide to Game Development with Unity. And this is a new weekly series where we're basically holding AMA sessions with industry professionals to help you land your game development job, whether it's marketing or producing or, 3D modeling animation all the way to software engineering. So with me today is James Simpson, widely known as Dr. Unity, and he is the developer for Snarf Quest, one of Larry Elmore's creations. So James, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Hey there. Can you guys see me okay? Am I moving around? Am I just a frozen face?
Yeah, if we can get some verification that it started. If you guys can hear everything okay. Let's see. Oh, James Simpson. Oh, it says you're frozen.
Yeah, I'm looking
All
at
right.
the YouTube channel.
Yeah, interesting. 1 sec. Why is the video frozen for you? Oh, there we go. How's that? Are we moving? Is James moving now?
Not yet.
All right, so everyone good. Dr. Unity is just frozen face. Everything good. Hearing is okay through still frozen face. All right, James, is your face unfrozen?
No, not at this moment, no.
So I believe there's about a 20-second delay. I think we're good. Discord is saying we're good. Apologies for that. I accidentally had you on pause there. Sorry about that. Like I said, guys, welcome to this AMA. This is something that I'm hosting with branding of GameDev John and Udemy efforts for the course Ultimate Guide to Game Development. And we'll be having AMAs with industry developers. So with me today is James Simpson. So while questions are rolling into the live chats, priority is going to go to the Discord, and then we'll hop over to the YouTube live event chat. But while questions are rolling in here, let's go ahead and kind of get started and introduce you to this community. So how long have you been developing games and working with Unity?
Well, that's a two-part question. So I grew up in Alaska, and there wasn't a whole lot to do in Alaska. My friend, my neighbor, his name was Michael Early, he had an Atari 400, and I went next door one day, and his parents had just got this thing, and I was like, that's really cool. It's the fact that you can type on a keyboard and make the computer tell things what to do, display things on the screen. And he's like, yeah, we can play games. I said, I don't want to play games. I want to make games. This was in 1982. So a long story short, it also came with a book called Basic. So I was looking through the Basic book, and I was learning about peaks and pokes and stands and go-subs and go-tos. And I was like, this is pretty fascinating. So I got home, and I got home late, okay? And every time I got home late, I would get grounded. So what happened was I got grounded, but I had the book. So I always get grounded for 30 days every time I did something, whatever I did. And so I read this Basic guide while I was in my room for 30 days. And then I would write code on the paper. And then after my groundation, I went to my friend's house, typed in a code, and it worked. So I was actually writing code, not even on a computer, but actually on paper, and then hoping that it worked when I went over there. So I was at a very young age when I decided, you know what, I want to be a programmer. And that's what drew me into this field. And then I started actually professionally in 1990 during the first Gulf War where I made a palletizing program for the United States military, Air Force, Herbert Field in Florida. And I was like, this is really good. So over the course of that time, I've worked for many different companies. And the last company I was working for, or one of the last companies I was working for, was a small little company called MySpace. And I was working on things like the music player and such, and Arbor Day widgets, and a whole bunch of widgets, which allowed you to have a graphical representation of an image in your web browser, and you were able to click on it, and that widget would pop off the web browser, and you can close down your web browser and still have it on your desktop. It was really awesome technology.
Really neat.
While we were there, Tom, our friend Tom, he kept saying, well, we need to build games. And we kept mentioning, hey, why don't we open up the API and let other people build games? He said, no, we want to build our games in-house. So it was my responsibility to go find gaming engines. And I've used Unreal, I've used Wild Tangent, I've used Fly 3D, I've used C4, Dark Basic. I've used a number of different engines. And there was one called Unity. And I said, okay, this was about 10 years ago. And I was like, okay, we'll give that a shot. And I found it was only on a Mac. I'm like, great. I'd rather be stabbed in the face with a rusty salted ice pick than have to use a Mac. So that being said, we had to download it, and yeah, I had to use it on a Mac. So they got me a Mac at MySpace, and I was working on it. And I built a game called MySpace Invaders. Anyway, I had a little Tom flying around and a little saucer. You had to shoot him. It was a lot of fun. And I was like, I like this gaming engine. As you know, coming from also Unreal, Unreal had the level editor built inside. The previous engines I worked on, when my first game I had published, which was called Invasion: The Last Stand, which was using Wild Tangent technology. Well, Wild Tangent worked a lot like Unity in the scope of it allowed you to play games in the web browser. And we thought that was a very popular concept back in when Netscape Navigator was still a thing. This had to be 96, 98, a long time ago. And what happened is Wild Tangent was actually created by a company, or by a guy named Alex St. John, who created DirectX. So when he left Microsoft, he decided to create, using DirectX 3, a company called Wild Tangent that allowed you to run ActiveX components inside a web browser. So I was playing with web browser technologies long before, in 3D world, long before, what we have now. Before HTML5, before all this other stuff. But the only problem is it was just an API. You didn't have any kind of graphical representation. So I had to go learn 3D Studio Max, and I had to go learn how to do animation with bone structures and use the DirectX format to do the modeling and importing. And the way it actually worked is I built a little turret game where it started off as you're a stationary turret, like Beachhead, where you're a stationary turret, and it spun around as enemies came at you, which was really great, except our producer at Wild Tangent goes, hey, that's great, now make it move. Well, now anyway, we had to turn the turret into a hover turret and had to move around. But to do that, I actually had to drive the hover turret around and manually place all the positions on trees because I didn't have a world editor. So I had the X, Y, and Z coordinates out in the top left corner.
Right.
And then write it all down. Yeah, I got to put a tree here, put a tree here.
That sounds awful.
I would replace everything because it was read in through a configuration file.
Yeah, that sounds really awful.
Yeah. It was. It was brutal. So when Unity came out and I put in a level editor, it came with a little like a spaceship just flying through rings. I'm like, they're onto something here. And then I was showing the platforms they can export to. I'm like, they're really onto something here. So to make a long story short, MySpace obviously closed down, and we were given severance. I was like, okay. And it just so happened I was finishing my degree at the Art Institute of Atlanta. And while I was there, I had won Best in Show, so I had this big elaborate table and everything showing off the work I've done in Unreal for my demo. And this guy came by. He's like, you got some impressive stuff here. I'm like, well, thank you. He's like, you want to come work for us? I'm like, well, I'm at MySpace. Why would I want to come work for you? And then 2 weeks later, of course, I get laid off.
Oh, man.
What? Hold on a second. Anyway, so I was horsing around. You know, I got a severance package. I was okay. And my wife's like, why don't you give him a call? I was like, well, okay. So I gave the guy a call. He's like, it'd be great if you can come work for us. We got a big team. You know, we got an impressive team, and we're actually working on an MMO. Okay. So I went to his facility and I walk inside and it was like an old abandoned church. I'm like, and there's like 2 cars in the parking lot. I'm like, maybe I'm in the wrong spot. So I came in, he's like, hey, and it was the guy. And he's showing me around, and there's one guy, he goes, here's the art department, and it's one guy. And he goes, here's the rigging animation department, which is another guy. And he goes, and you're going to build this MMO called Bobber's World. I'm sorry, what? And he's like, yeah, do you have a suggestion on engine? How about Unity? Had no idea what I was doing. There was a application at the time called SmartFox Server, which allows you to do socket server connections. And with that, within 3 months, I actually had a prototype of a MMO called Bobber's World in Unity, not having a clue what I was doing. So I had to use a Mac, I had to use Unity, and I had to use SmartFox Server. And SmartFox Server, it's a Java-based application, but all the scripting for it was done in AS1, which ActionScript 1, which was a small nightmare. But otherwise,
right. And that's used for like MMO hostings, right?
That's correct.
It's still around today, but like Photon kind of came in and took over that.
That's correct. Exit Games Photon. So this was kind of before Photon. I mean, Photon was starting to get its thing. Unity had their own server network in place, but it was still only running on a Mac. And then finally, they decided, you know what, maybe we should open it up for PC. We're like, it was great. And so, yeah, I got an email from David. It's like, hey, it's been 10 years since you've used Unity. I'm like, whoa, thank you very much. And so I've been really using Unity ever since. And I used to have a training center called Dr. Unity in a place here in Atlanta, Georgia called US Gaming Arena, where usually once a month or sometimes twice a month, I would go down there and teach people Unity. So I would basically talk for half an hour, and then I would spend the rest of the half an hour, building code for people. They would ask me questions like, how would you do this? How would you do that?
Right.
And I'd just go ahead and code it for them. So that was a lot of fun. And that was about 8 years ago.
Man, that is insane. So that means that's insane. So that means you've been using Unity, because I picked it up 8 years ago when 2.6 was released, which was when it became free, which means you paid for that product.
I still have a receipt for my first $140. Yeah.
That is insane.
Yep.
All right. So here's what I took away from that. You have been developing games and software applications for just about as long as I've been alive, if not longer, and that makes you a true veteran in this space, and the amount of knowledge and expertise you have is, I imagine, incredible. And the fact that you're staying with the latest technologies and working with Unity is super awesome. So we have some questions here in the AMA, so we'll go ahead and take questions, and then I want to ask you about your game Snarf Quest and your relationship with Larry Elmore. So one of the questions we have is from EMFPC in the Discord. What to think beforehand when creating your dream game, team, story, etc. How big or small can be your own group?
Well, I can tell you, I used to teach at the Art Institute of Atlanta, and I also taught at American Intercontinental University as well as Gwinnett Tech here in Atlanta, Georgia. And what I have found out, usually my class is around 26 students in size. And what I taught was prototyping. My job was to teach students in about 60 to 66 hours, 1 hour, one session a week of 6 hours for 10 weeks or 11 weeks, depending on the summer, whereas they would have to build a prototype of a game, and I had to have a start, a middle, and an end. Okay, it wasn't just nothing. It had to feel like a cohesive unit. So with that in mind, you have some students that really want to learn, and you have some students that just don't really have that passion. And programming and building games is all about passion. So I have found out when I broke the team, because I would have the 26 students, I want to break them up into groups of 4 and 5 is what I found out. Having teams bigger than 5, they usually, what happens is let's just say we have a team of 8, you only have 3 of them that won't even do anything, but yet they'll want their A. And then anything lower than 4, it wasn't very, it was hard for them to finish. After saying that, there was 2 teams in the 8 years I was teaching there that were a 2-man team, and they actually rocked. Now, they also lived together. They lived in an apartment together, and they worked on it all the time. And they were very fantastic. And the other was 2 girls, and they also did very good. But I found out there was a study here at Georgia State, and sure enough, they found out the same thing I already found out too, that teams of 4 and 5 usually works very well. You usually have a programmer, 2 artists, a game designer, and a director, and usually level designer. Usually the roles that kind of break up.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to like collaboration projects, I mean, I imagine every game developer I've ever met has that one folder on their desktop of just like projects that have never been finished, and they're just all collaboration projects. And like you said, you get like maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4 max before morale dies. And the truth be told, when you're in a collaboration project, especially when it's your collaboration idea, nobody's as passionate about the idea as you. So it's really it's hard to make everyone that's a part of this with their own busy schedules to dedicate time to your game. So it definitely is like a challenge of itself to overcome.
Well, that was one of the things I also made too. Is I said during the collaboration process in the groups, I said each team member had to contribute something to the game, their own idea, because otherwise, if they're not vested in the product is not going to get finished. They're not going to care about the process. Hey, what kind of games do you play? What mechanics do you like? Do you like the storytelling? Do you like first-person shooters, third-person shooters? What is it about building games that brought you to the school in order to do it? And I've made each person put in their theme, whether it was horror or sci-fi or Western or apocalyptic, whatever. But I want every person to have some kind of vested interest in it. And I found out when that worked, and when that happened, usually the projects were a lot more successful than people who didn't want to do it.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. So you talk about limiting your size of your team, right? So yes. Aaron Cole has a question about what advice do you have for if you're trying to make a game solo? Like, what are your options? What if you don't know an animator or an artist, or if you're a programmer and you're terrible with art? What are your options to make a solo game?
The asset store.
Yes,
it is phenomenal. I've spent way too much money on the asset store. We have a conference here called Siege, and I showed it one day, and I spent like 30 or 40 seconds just scrolling through all the plugins I purchased. Also, you try to find people who like the same passions you do. If you're building a robot fighting game, or a game that's you have to move around in hexes, or if you're building a first-person shooter, please don't build any more first-person shooters. Well, if you're building first-person shooters, okay, find some people who like that. And you can visit, there's lots of, I don't know where you guys are because you're all over the world. Here in Atlanta and in Georgia itself, we have what's called meetups, meetup.com. And you can type in things like you like Unity or you like games. And there's usually groups around your area that will, have similar interests and allows you to meet up and actually talk about these things.
That's awesome.
What advice do you have making game solo? Plan everything out as much as possible. It's one thing to get behind the keyboard and just like, I'm going to type something today, and you're just typing, and then you realize you forgot this and you forgot that. You forgot to create a game element. You forgot to create your player or your asteroid or what have you. You need to be very focused and methodical of how you actually lay everything out. It's very, very, very easy when you're doing a game solo to get overwhelmed. So I would recommend going to the Unity Asset Store, or obviously take John's course. And
there you go. Yeah, learn. Yeah, the ultimate guide to game development. Go ahead and learn how to make your own games solo with art assets provided. So also to kind of go on top of his question too is what can you expect to face and why should you stick with it? It's going to be tough. Like finishing a game is no easy task. Like whether you're a team of 5, 100, or if you're an individual, even using the asset store, it makes it easy, but it's really tough. And one thing that I've had experience with finishing my solo games is build an audience around that solo game to where it almost feels like an obligation to finish that game, and it drives you to complete it. So Thorson in the AMA chat here asked a question: how big is Cell Block Studios? If it's only you and Walter, how do you do it all? Follow up, and we'll go for his follow up after.
Sure. Well, Cell Block Studios, I hire a bunch of contractors. Even in the gaming industry, normally when you work for a AAA studio, it's around 18 months. So usually every 18 months you're looking for another job unless there's a sequel or another project coming down the pipeline. So what I have done is I have found out that it's best to use contractors, because I don't need an animator or I don't need an artist on staff once they finish the models. I'll have the art come in, I will place it. I usually do most of the work. I do rigging, animation, modeling, texturing, some sound design, level design, and programming, and sound effects. I usually don't do voiceover, music composition, Those I hire out to people. That's what I did with Snarf Quest. But I would say most of it was Snarf Quest was either done or re-imaged by myself. But
So
it's a
speaking
passion
of,
project of mine.
right. So speaking of Snarf Quest, right? So his follow-up question is, do you use any tools from the asset store, and did you have any challenges integrating them?
Yes, I used a few. The biggest problem is namespacing. I'll bring back up slightly. Unity 4, the beast light mapping was awesome. We're probably going to get to a part where we talk about Snarf Quest and we talk about Larry Elmore. But to make a long story short, we built a 40-minute point-and-click adventure game in 3 weeks, and it's about 40 minutes of gameplay with 3 people. With that said, I was using the Beast Mapper lighting. Worked phenomenal. Then 5 came out, and they put that Enlighten in there, and that screwed everything that I was doing. I had it already developed for the Wii U and everything, and it looked terrible. So I had to actually pull that back until 2017.2 that they finally fixed the light mapping for the outside. They have to do with the trees. Otherwise, I get all the blocky shadows, and it was an absolute nightmare to work with. But yeah, I used a few assets from the asset store, and a lot of it was I like to organize things when I put things in my Unity project. So I will create in my project folder, I'll create a third-party tools folder, and I'll move things like I'll use Sunshine or something like that, or a shader kind of tool, and I'll put it in there. But the engineers who actually made the shader or the plugin, they're always looking for the root of the asset directory to look for other configuration files, and that was always been a big nightmare. It's like, okay, so my third-party tools directory gets a little wonky because sometimes I have to have it in the root. There's some really good tools in the asset store. Usually for like navigation, since I did a point and click, it was fine with the mouse. But when I put it onto the Xbox One, I actually had to go into a controller. And I was like, I didn't want to rewrite this thing. And I found one on the asset store, and I mimicked that. And I was like, okay, that works. And then any kind of questions, most of the plugins I purchase on the asset store, I make sure I have access to source code. If they're just going to give me a DLL, I don't need to deal with it. And I look at the ratings on it, and I see how well people respond. Hey, I know you're a rinky-dink. That's not really fair. You're an individual programmer, and you may not be able to answer everyone's questions, and you're putting on an asset on the asset store for $10, and you're gonna provide some support. So if a week or two, I'll go within a week. If I ask you an email and then I follow up with it a week later and you still haven't answered me, then yeah, I'm not gonna be dealing with your product anymore. But I know some people go on holiday, some people have life events. So hey, what's going on? Just give us a little update. But yeah, the big thing I look for asset store is source code, no DLLs, and I look at ratings, and I actually read the ratings because sometimes people just don't know how to implement whatever it is. It's like, this is too complicated. Well, okay, that doesn't mean it's a bad product. That just means your understanding of what their description was or how to implement it may not be exactly where you need to be.
Very cool. So while we're on the topic of Snarf Quest, tell us a bit about Snarf Quest. What is it, and who is Larry Elmore, and how did you guys meet, and how did you guys go through the process of creating Snarf Quest, and what did you do to market Snarf Quest?
Well, that's a lot of loaded questions. Let's see here. We can start with, so as I grew up in Alaska, my big thing was reading a lot of books. And when I read books, when I came down to the lower 48, I went to this school, and I moved from Alaska to Florida. Go with it. So I went to the school, and I was late because we actually drove down from Alaska, and we visited all the states except Hawaii. So I was 2 weeks late for school. But yeah, they had a book fair. So I walked into they were closing up the book fair, and they had all these little books on the table. And I walked over, and there was this book, and it was a beautiful, beautiful blue book. And I picked it up. And it just felt like I was playing with butterflies. It was like, oh, this is awesome. And there's these 3 characters staring at me. I'm staring back at them, and I like medieval fantasy. I'm like, this is awesome. So I went and bought the book. It was like $2.95, and I'm starting to read it. And I'm like, oh, there's a book before this. It's the red book, So it's called Dragonlance is the name of the series. And I'm like, and then I got the first book and the red one, and once again, 3 characters are staring at me. I'm like, who is this? And I looked, and it says Elmore. Who the hell is Elmore? Now, at the same time, this is pre-internet. This is 80. Good Lord, 84. When I looked at this, so I had no way to find out There was no other, I saw a bunch of TSR stuff. My neighbor in Alaska, he was a big AD&D, so I remember seeing the Red Box edition. I'm like, well, this is pretty fascinating stuff. So I've always kept up with Larry Elmore, and when I would go to bookstores and I would buy like Choose Your Own Adventure books, and I see Doris, oh, I know who that is. That's Larry Elmore. So anyway, one day I was living outside Pensacola, and Larry Elmore came to Pensacon. This was in '93. And it was called Hurricane at the time. I'm sorry. And I got to meet him. Mr. Elmore, thank you. He's like, just talking. So he didn't know me from anybody. So later on, I moved to Atlanta, and he would come to DragonCon all the time. And I would come by his booth and buy a print and such. And, I would talk to him a little bit. I started to get more, not as fanboyism. I was able to have real kind of conversations with him. But he sees so many people. There was nothing to make him stick. So Larry was having a drawing class about 10 years ago where you actually go to this place called the Doe Run Inn. And it was built in 1770. It's pre-Revolutionary War. Okay, and the walls are like 3 feet thick, and you got this huge wooden door, and it was in the middle of Kentucky, nowhere. But you sat in there, you sat with Larry Elmore for 5 days, and you drew. He would teach you how to draw. I'm like, well, that's fascinating. So I brought my wife, and what we would do is we'd get up, we'd have breakfast, and then we'll go downstairs, and he would show us how to shoot photography and how to draw, and built up a rapport. And that night we would sit around, we'd drink, we'd talk, we'd play games, and he started getting to know me. So that was about 10 years ago is when I really started, he started remembering my name, I guess you could say. So about, and over the time I've kept in contact with him, not overly all over him, but, just, here and there. So then I built his website for him, and I proposed a website for him because he was using WordPress. And he's like, well, I got this guy, and we're using WordPress. I said, you don't want to use WordPress. So let me build you a better site. So I built him a better site, and he's like, that's pretty good. I says, yeah, I program about, going off. He's like, okay. And he had a product called Snarf Quest. So when Larry was at TSR creating all this art for Dungeons and Dragons, he told Gary Gygax, he goes, look, I can't keep creating all this art for you. I need to have something, okay? I need something of my own that I can have published. And Gary Gygax goes, hey, we have a magazine called Dragon Magazine. If you want, you draw something or paint something, whatever, and we'll publish in a magazine. So Larry thought about it. He's like, well, I've never done a comic strip before. So he created something called Snarf Quest. So Snarf Quest is based upon a character. His name is Snarf. He's a Zifa. And in the story, he's in his village, and the king dies. And they have all the elders come out, and they go, okay, the first one to amass the most amount of wealth in 1 year will become the new king. So Snarf Quest goes on an adventure. And, of course, he's always getting into trouble, trying to amass, like he'll wind up getting a bag of gold at the same time dropping it in a river, okay? So about 3 or 4 years ago, because obviously the story has gone on for so long, I want to say 3 years ago, I was on the phone with him like on August 8th, and I says, hey, Larry, I would like to do a Snarf Quest game. And he's like, well, it's his first IP, his first thing he owned. And he's like, well, I trust you. We've been friends for a long time. I said, well, thank you, Larry. He's like, you know what? You can show it after DragonCon at my booth. DragonCon's in 3 weeks. I know you can do it. So I had 3 weeks to build an entire game for Larry Elmore's quality. I'm like, oh my. So sure enough, in 3 weeks, 2 other people, we got it done. Now, it had some bugs, but it was a playable and it's pretty solid demo. I would say about 94, 96% done for a good, solid proof of concept demo. And Larry doesn't play games. He's a painter. He's an artist. He barely uses a computer. He uses a computer for Photoshop.
Right.
So he actually sat and played the game for 40 minutes, and he goes, "That was great. Where's the rest?" Now I'm videotaping him. I got tears running down my face and everything. I was like, "Holy crap!" He's like, "Where's the rest?" I'm like, "Larry, I had 3 weeks to build this." He's like, "Okay." So that's how Snarf Quest started. It's been a passion project of mine, and I had to make sure it's the same quality of kind of Larry Elmore's because I don't want him to look bad. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been challenging. I got episode 1 done. I actually have some boxes of, I actually mimicked the Dungeons & Dragons box. And it looks like a smaller version of it.
Right.
Because I wanted to actually have a big box collection because these are things that I grew up in the 80s. I'm used to having a physical box in my hand. And, I don't have a problem with digital. I actually have it on Steam. but there was something tangible about opening that shrink wrap for the first time.
That's
so
awesome.
I know I answered at least 2 questions. What was the other?
No, that's awesome. You pretty much answered them. So, for those wanting to know where can they find information about Snarf Quest, where can they play it? If you go in the description of this live event, there is a link to Snarf Quest on Steam. Now, what can you tell us about your Kickstarter experience? So you ran a successful Kickstarter for Snarf Quest. I forget how many, how much you raised, but what can you tell us about raising money for an indie game like that, and what was your experience?
Sure. Well, I had a name. That was the key thing. And, you know, as John mentioned earlier, the biggest thing is when you come out with your own solo product, you have to build up an audience. Don't expect to go to either Kickstarter or Indiegogo, all these other Fig or whatever. Don't expect to just go there, put up your game idea, and expect hundreds of thousands of people to start backing you, even if you have a good game concept. As I mentioned, I went to the Dragon Con, and I showed it off to people. And they go, "You can do a Kickstarter for it?" I go, "I don't know." And then I went to MomoCon, and I got a booth at MomoCon here in Atlanta, Georgia. And, you know, same thing. You can do a Kickstarter? I'm not sure. And then I went to Gen Con, showed it off at Gen Con. You can do a Kickstarter? I'm not sure. So I spent about a year before I actually took the plunge and actually did a Kickstarter. So I built up a following. I got email addresses, and I got people's opinions about the game and what it should look like. And, you know, for my own project and my own passions and what I thought of it. I like point-and-click adventure games when I grew up. I mean, King's Quest, Space Quest, Laser Suit Larry. These are games that I was very proud of playing. And you know, the puzzle-solving aspect of it is what I like the most about it. So I, you know, gathered a lot of email addresses, and I kept in contact with people. And of course, you would get a lot of people coming to the booth. You know, I'm a YouTuber, and I got whatever 50,000 or 100,000 people subscribed, and I like to do a little report on you. So I would do a lot of interviews. Microsoft kept interviewing me. I even had a little demo at the Microsoft here at Perimeter Mall here in Atlanta. And you know, so I made a lot of contacts before I decided, you know what? Okay, let's sit down and figure out how much it's actually going to cost to build. And I put out, you know, for the Kickstarter fees and how much is the production for T-shirts, and you know, what do we want to offer? And then I made some deals, and I says, okay, I got all that number down. I know what that number was. I says, okay, and I looked at my contact database. I'm like, okay, we can give this a shot. So in my case, I launched it at a convention, and I ended it on a convention because you're only going to get money. And for those who watch the Kickstarter, you can look at KickTrack, KICKTRAQ.com, and you can see how it comes in. It's essentially it's a bowl, okay? So you can get all your money in the front, you're gonna get all your money in the back. In the middle, you're basically go, oh my God, I'm gonna make through my Kickstarter. So don't panic when that happens, but just know that you have to get like 20% of your money in the first 3 days, or you're probably not going to make your goal. And I learned that, and that's why I launched it with the biggest audience that I could, which was at a convention. So, and I ended it at a convention. So it worked out really well for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it definitely did. And you guys are making, I believe it's episodic, right? So you're making additional episodes. Yes.
That's
very
correct.
Cool. So I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, how did you get the name Dr. Unity?
There's a gentleman here. I'm going to blame it on a guy named Andrew Greenberg. Andrew Greenberg is the president of the GGDA, the Georgia Game Developer Association here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was at his house working on a project that got on hold because of Atari. But I was working on a project, and he was like, James, you should do something with all this Unity knowledge you got. I'm like, yeah, it's one of those engines I just can't put down. He's like, why don't you, you need a name or a moniker or something like that. And I go, okay. And he's like, we pushed names back and forth. And I'm going to go with, he came up with, how about Dr. Unity? So I typed in drunity.com, and it was like a Indian marriage counseling service when I looked at it 10 years ago. And I was like, how about Dr. DOCTOR? So I typed in Dr. Unity, and it was available, so I went ahead and bought it.
Nice.
And that's kind of the moniker that I've been going over. So
very cool.
I went to a party last night at the GGDA, IGDA, Independent Game Developer Association party. And I mean, that's how I'm introduced to people. It's like, hey, doctor, how you doing? fine. So it's just my utter passion for Unity products, and I'm always promoting Unity products. And it's one of those things, like, I have no problem going to people and helping them within reason to help them code, or sometimes I actually just do things for fun. It's like, oh, that sounds challenging. I'll just go ahead and build it for them. And, not in game, but like a mechanic or something.
Right.
Like that. So
That's awesome.
It is. It's a lot of fun. I get to meet a lot of wonderful people, and I get to see the twinkle, the sparks, in their eyes, especially when I was seeing sometimes of my students, when I can just see, it's like, oh, they got it. They're going to get it, and I don't mind giving them help to get through their product.
So I want to go through. Let's show a bit of love to YouTube. We have some live chatters here. I'm just going to quickly go through. Let's see what everyone is saying. He is all awesome. Snarf is the best by BJ Hensley. Aki says, Aki says John's course is amazing. Thank you. Have to agree. Let's see. Kay Wilson, Jonathan's course is very good. He encourages anyone wanting to learn Unity to check it out. Let's see. Question. All right, here we go. Question. So Musalo asks questions. How about C# courses like MIT Python course on their YouTube channel? 2-semester course finishing. Which makes you solid coder? Mimicking academic approach. Okay, so the question's a little confusing. However, he brought in academic approach. So that's actually a really popular question. What is, in your experience, what is your opinion on having a college degree to make it in this industry?
That's a trick question. One of the things I tried to bring when I was an instructor at the Art Institute is real world experience. Now, the colleges in general, they have certain golden rules, I guess you can call them, or rubrics they need to teach the students, like business logic, or how to do algorithms and everything. But they don't really put it in at least the ones that I'm familiar with, haven't really put it in a real world environment. A lot of times in the real world, you'll be coding something and you'll be 95% done, and the boss will come over, put his hands or her hands on your shoulder and go, you know what? That's really good, but I changed my mind. I wanted to go this. So you constantly got to be changing your code, and sometimes and the deadlines don't change. So it's just kind of like in class where you have the 10 weeks of 6 hours per week to work on something. And in the last week, I said, hey, I know you did a third-person shooter, but now make it a 2D side-scroller. And that happens in the real world. So the instructors at the colleges that I'm talking about specifically, they try to teach you certain aspects of it. But I don't think they throw in the gotcha, so it happens in the real world. YouTube has been an amazing resource. So is Udemy. An amazing resource for having people who, like myself, have been through the trenches of having to change code constantly and see really easy how to do things. I personally like the when unity3d.com/learn came out, because what I noticed when I had my students and they would look at YouTube, I can watch their looking at their eyes. I say, okay, we're going to learn about this mechanic, and I'm writing up on the board, and they're right now YouTubing it, which was good. I got that. They're trying to get more information. But the first thing they do is they look in the bottom right corner. Well, what's in the bottom right corner of a YouTube video? How long the video is. And they would look in the bottom right, and their eyes would start rolling because it's like 45 minutes long. They're like, I can't sit through 45 minutes watching this. So what I noticed that Unity did very, very well is they did chunks, about 3 to 4 minutes, because usually people can focus for about 3 to 4 minutes. And we've been talking for, oh my Lord, we've been talking for 42 minutes right now. And I don't know how many people are still hanging out with us, but the point is, when you do small chunks, you can retain it, and then you can either go to your second monitor, or you can close down the YouTube and try typing in the code, then trying to absorb something for 45 minutes, and then going, okay, and you'll skip a step, and you'll be frustrated, but it's like, I call it short controlled burst. It showed you just enough of a taste for you to start letting your mind wander and explore and get more challenging. So I am of the mindset, if you're, and obviously colleges teach you other courses that you may or may not be really interested in. I enjoyed my time at the Art Institute of Atlanta learning about life drawing, because I'm not really an artist, but it was really nice doing life drawing, science of light, getting back up on my physics. So there are other courses offered in a full degree program that you won't get. But if you're only focused on programming, then yeah, YouTube, Udemy, and all the other hundreds of thousands of other sites out there.
Exactly.
The biggest thing that I would tell people though is find a site such as Game Dev John in which you can actually talk to the instructor. That is why I went to college, okay? Because I needed that person to talk to. I needed to say, look, here's where I'm at, and I can't find this answer. I know it's floating around. And the instructors that I had at the time were very well at answering my questions to a point. And then I had to go find my answer. But sometimes they would point me in the correct direction, or at least where to go look.
Right.
And once again, I'm doing my own research. But yeah, so find a course that actually gives you feedback, not just here's my video, good luck.
Right, exactly. And it's so important to know that if you want to make it in this industry, it's about the effort you put into it. So like James and myself were completely self-taught. We attended college to meet like-minded individuals and to talk to those instructors. But ultimately, if you're just programming, and this is the biggest problem with universities, is if you're just programming inside the classroom, but when you go home, you're just playing video games or you're hanging out with your friends doing whatever you want to do, you're not going to make it in this industry because you're only practicing your skill in the classroom. It's a skill. You gradually get better. You have to work at it. And when I was working for a tech startup, I would interview. We have a school in Atlanta called Georgia Tech, and it's where it's rated as like one of the highest C# or CS courses, computer science courses in the nation. And I would interview these guys, and the reason why they get interviews is because they have that degree. However, I would hire none of them because they lack the real world experience. They have this piece of paper and they're so smart when it comes to theory, but they have no real world experience. They only practice their skill in the classroom. They've never made a game on their own. They've never researched Unity until it was taught to them in the classroom. Who do I want to hire? Who do I want working for me? Someone with a 4-year college degree that has no real world experience, or someone who's been programming since they were 15 years old? I want that 15-year-old because that's the Steve Jobs of tomorrow.
Yes. I mean, yeah, that's what it is. It's all about, about the passion. And people say, what was the last game you played? I go, Bard's Tale, 1985 from Interplay. They're like,
right.
And I'm like, that was the game that actually got me started. We were using Brian Fargo. And later on, I got to work on Wasteland 2 from Brian Fargo. So it's like, serendipity where the world came around. I was like, I'm working for the guy who created, my ultimate game that got me started on this thing in the first place.
Right, so, exactly.
And you got to be practicing too. And I was telling people the other day, I says, look, I don't want you to build the next MMO. Please don't make an MMO. Don't build the next MMO. I said, start with Asteroids, Breakout, and Pac-Man. Okay? Those are the mechanics. So just start with those games first and start building up a rapport, because those are going to give you the foundation tools that you need in order to start building bigger and better games. Okay? I mean, don't try to make the best game ever at the beginning. Do like 10 or 20 little small games. That doesn't take long. And you're basically trying to teach yourself certain mechanics and start building up your own library. I have a library now because a lot of my clients are always like, I want Twitter, I want Instagram, I want to be able to post. I'm like, okay. So I have a whole social networking library in Unity that I just call cellblockstudios. My namespace, and poof, it's already done. But I've had to build that over the course of time. And then as Facebook changes and the API for Facebook changes and Twitter changes and Instagram phases, I just update those as needed, but I don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I have a lot of library of tools of things I have built.
That's awesome. So I'm going through, I'm just going through the YouTube chat here, and let's see. Communication, what Dr. Unity is saying is true. That happens to me when I got out of college. From Esther. Aki is playing Dota. Like his advice, start small. Definitely keep your scope small. When you're entering the field, don't focus on creating a project that's just unrealistic to complete. You have to get that one game finished. And once you finish something, it becomes like, it becomes an addiction to finish your project. So you always want to make sure you're doing that. Looking at the AMA here, Drew asked a question. So what kind of problems do game devs face on a day-to-day?
Problem solving. I mean, like today, for whatever reason, my mind was going blank on timers in C#. I'm like, okay, I typed in timers, and I'm like, okay, I got to change the namespace. And I was like, what is going on here? And sometimes you draw a blank on things. And sometimes the internet as a helpful tool that it is, can be a crutch because we're so used to, if we have a problem, we Google it. I mean, you don't hear anyone saying Bing it or Alta Vista it or Yahoo it. I mean, we're always just Googling it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it is a crutch at the same time. Like I said, it is problem solving. You know what you want to do. I used to have a sign on my ceiling that said, you should be working. So I sit there and lean back and it says, you should be working. It says, okay, I'll get back to work. And a lot of what you do as a developer is research. You're constantly looking for new and better ways to do things. I'm still, since I started with C# 1.0, okay, I'm still learning new things with C# 6 and 7 that came out. I'm like, well, because I'm so used to using, it's like we didn't have events back in C# 1, for example, but now we have events and delegates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, here's how I would do it before, and now I can do it this way in 2 lines of code. Well, that's great, but I have to relearn that relearn that new tool. And sometimes that's challenging because you don't want to get set in your ways too much. You want to understand the problem before you jump into the deep end of the pool. But yeah, I can't emphasize how important research is. When I was teaching, one of the things I would always do, I would have artists, and the artists were responsible for making 3D models. I said, that's fine. I said, what do you want to do? And this guy said, I want to make a gas can. I said, okay, I want 2 reference images. Go out, find 2 reference images of the gas cans you're going to make, and then model of that. And then the next week he came by, and he had this, it looked like a propane tank with I guess, an elephant head on it and 4 legs. And I was like, what is this? He's like, it's a gas tank. I says, no, it's not. So show me your reference image.
That's
I'm
awesome.
like, that's the problem. Okay, you have to have reference images. And a lot of artists can actually sketch out a futuristic weapon, and then model it. That's fine, but they have something to go off of. I mean, Larry does the same thing when he does his drawing. He actually takes a lot of pictures and then he composites them in Photoshop and he changes the opacity and see. Then he draws it on a canvas. And then he paints on that. Okay, so there's a lot of research to how the composition in his mind, how he does things. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about that John talked about just a moment ago was with the small games. The other reason why I mentioned Breakout, Asteroids, and Pac-Man, because in Unity you can use what's called primitive shapes. Okay, cubes and spheres and capsules and such. These are things that you don't need an artist for. So you can use the game object primitives to actually start building these games without having to worry about the overhead of an artist or what it aesthetically looks like. Don't care what it looks like. Get it working first. Then say, hey, look, I built this. Go to a meetup and say, I want this to look pretty. People say, oh, so you already have invested your time into this. You have a working prototype, and now you can attract more people than sitting around going, hey, I have this great game idea. We're going to make Mario, but we're going to use a girl. Like, no. Just, work with something. That's not a game idea. That's you're modding something. Okay? So start with small games that you can have the graphics capability already at your hands, or you can download something from textures.com or whatever, and there's lots of sprite sheets out there for you to use. So just use the assets that you have available and go find people to make it pretty.
Right. So I'm looking through the chat, and some of the YouTubers who aren't in the Discord channel. So if you're in the Discord channel, that means you're signed up for my course. And I see some comparisons going on between myself and Ben Tristram, right? So that's kind of the 2 tier level instructors on Udemy. And there's a difference between my course and any course you're going to find out there. And it's the fact that I teach you how to research. We use the API. I show you how to search and solve your own problems from scratch. We cover logic versus where traditional courses are just they're just copy and paste and follow along. And if you don't know how to problem solve, then you're only capable of writing the code that the instructor gives you. So my course is all about making you an independent developer and giving you the drive to self-educating yourself. And looking here, Daniel Fisher asked, John, do you ever find yourself spending hours or days on a bug or feature that ends up being trivial? Yeah. Absolutely. Every programmer goes through that, where just something so ridiculous is just like, it might even just be like a simple negative sign that you were just like stumped on. Yeah, I mean, that happens to everyone. One of my favorite things about programming, though, and not a trivial bug, but a bug where you're spending hours on it and you're just stumped, and then you'll go to bed and you'll wake up and you know how to solve that problem. That to me is the greatest feeling about programming.
It's funny you mentioned that. So in my job that I'm working on during the day is I had to work with a grid. So I had a grid of 3x5.
Right.
So I have position 1 on top left corner and going 1 through 5, then 6 through 10, then 11 through 15. But arrays are 0 based, and sure enough, I was like, why is everything off by 1? Because I wasn't subtracting 1 because of the grid position. So I mean, I spent like an hour and a half going, why is this wrong? And essentially, I just had to subtract 1 from it. Boop, everything started working. So just because sometimes you get too into it, I can't recommend where I work. I get out of the office. I have to walk away from my desk. Otherwise, you'll drive yourself mad going, you'll be staring in the book for a long time. You walk, go get yourself a drink of water, go to the bathroom, walk outside or whatever like that. You're like, oh, that's what it is. And I found out, don't stand in doorways. There's something magical about doorways. You will forget whatever you're trying to think of. So don't stand in a doorway. And that has been proven too. You can research it. Standing in doorways make you forget. So if you're going to talk to a boss or whatever, don't stand in a doorway. Just not stand back until you're invited in and then go in. But yeah, get away from the problem. Just let your mind see other things, not looking at the code. Look at the water cooler, the pictures on the wall, nothing on the wall, just something. Just walk around and get away from it.
Exactly. No, it's great advice. Do you see Funkies? Go ahead.
So I see a lot of people asking for 2 years experience. See, obviously that's that cat and dog problem. It's like, how do I get 2 years of experience if I can't get a job? Well, that's what I was just recommending. Start building small little micro games. I mean, think about it. You spend, you make 1 game a month. Okay, in theory, you can do 12 a year. Okay, therefore, when you go to show people, hey, show me 2 years of experience. Well, here's the games I'm putting out. You can put it on new undergrounds. There's lots of places you can actually host your Unity.
Yeah, like I think it's itch.io. Itch.io allows you to host.
Yeah, itch.io is another place, so you can show a history. Now, the other key thing I talk about, especially with my art students, is go to some place and post frequently. Okay, when I say frequently, like once a month, you want to show that you're still committed to your craft. So itch.io, post something. It doesn't have to be beautiful, like a breakout. Even look, I got my player controller working, and then the next month, hey, I got player controller working with enemy AI. Okay, or I'm sorry, you're shooting, and then the third month, hey, I got my player moving with shooting and enemy AI. Okay, so that shows that you are passionate about it and you're willing to continue it. And you can just point people, hey, here's some of the things that work at. And, they look at stuff from 2 years ago. They know you've gotten better since then. And you should show that you've gotten better since then. Okay, that's why it has a little wonderful timestamp. So the best advice I can have for you is start on small little applications and then start posting them up. You're not looking you're not going to change the world. You're not looking to make $1 million. You want to show that you've got 2 years of working experience. And that you can prove 2 years of working experience.
Yeah, and the best thing to do, do not wait. If you're a student, don't wait till you get to college to start making games. Make it now. There's no reason you can't figure it out. You have Udemy for the price of takeout. You can learn how to program. You have YouTube. You can learn how to program. Just always be making a game. You can't be playing video games. If you're serious about making it in this industry, you can admire video games, you can play them on your free time, but really, if you want to make it in this industry, you have to make games. It's really funny. So when I was attending, because I was also a student at the Arden, so I didn't finish there, but I attended it, and that's where we connected. And students would be watching other people play video games on YouTube. And I was just like, why are you doing that? What are you here for? And then when a popular game called Titanfall came out, everyone literally took off of school to go play that game. I saw that game. To this day, I have yet to play this game. I look at that game as I have no interest in playing it, but I'm so PO'd that I didn't make that game. Nobody else looks at it that way. Everyone else is looking at it as, oh, I can't wait to play that game. I don't want to play that game. I want to make that game. And that's really how you differentiate yourself from those who are going to make it in this industry and those who are going to get lucky and make it in, or they're just going to get lost in the dust. Looking at YouTube, let's see here. Does Dr. Unity have any tutorials online? Good question. Dr. Unity, where are your tutorials?
Yes and no. I have a plethora of tutorials. I was asked by a company to make some tutorials, and I made some tutorials, but then I went on vacation, and I didn't get back with the people in time, so it has not been published yet.
If you ever
Did
come
that
to
come out?
Yeah, if you ever come to oh, what happened?
I'm trying to type newgrounds.com, but
Oh, Newgrounds. Oh, into the chat.
yeah,
Yeah,
it keeps
if
saying
you Google
any
search
web
Newgrounds.
address, so
So let's see here.
ahead.
We're approaching the
Wow,
54-minute mark here. Let's see if there's any last-minute questions before we sort of wrap up here. If you're interested in seeing Dr. Unity,
multi-talkie. 727. How do you decide which games make money?
yeah.
I can answer that question. I don't think about making money when I make games. That's the honest truth. I don't look at I'm going to make a game to make money. I make games because I like making games. Now,
Right.
Well, why are you doing that? Well, that's what I have a passion for.
Right. So
And
that should be the
why
end goal. That should be the end goal, right? You make games because you love it, not because you want to make money. Definitely too, though, like it's pretty common. You'll see companies chase trends. So like, you know, the Flappy Bird trend, right? As soon as Flappy Bird was announced that the creator was taking it offline, about a dozen, maybe honestly, it's probably 100 popped up on the App Store the next day. And some of them have made it. Question, why are there no tutorials for complete mobile games?
Well,
great question.
Yeah. First off, I will tell people I work a lot with people in New Zealand, of all places, and they're doing a mobile game. And one of the biggest things that they discovered was, one of the biggest things was to make mobile games. I have respect for Mac. I understand the security that Mac puts into their stuff. But when you want to make an iOS game, make it for Android. Then when you're done and you're very, very, very happy with it, then run Xcode and make a build. I have found out that I can make a build in an Android and get something on my phone in about 2 minutes. I mean, in the 2 minutes we have left, I can throw a cube on there, put it on my phone right now, and have a cube spinning within 2 minutes. That's done. The exact same thing using Xcode will take a minimum of 45 minutes.
And
the exact same thing.
And that's not even considering the setup required with getting your provisioning profile. At some companies, I've spent anywhere between 4 to 8 hours just setting up provisioning profiles to work with iOS. It's a total pain in the ass.
But I understand why they have it, because they don't want people putting IPA files unlicensed or unregistered on other people's devices, because that can introduce a security problem. I got that. But holy crap, it's an absolute nightmare. But to answer your question, there are tutorials coming out to show you step by step, at least for Android, but not really for iOS. I could show you iOS to a point, but they do update every time they come out with a new version of an iPhone. There's a new iOS coming out, and they change Xcode a lot. Xcode is the equivalent of Visual Studios. For those who don't know what Xcode is, it's like an all-in-one architecture. Let's see here. The site's supposed to follow Dr. Unity advice. I think there's some here in the bottom of the YouTube. I do have a Facebook account. I'm kind of social network out since I worked at MySpace. I'm hardly ever really on Facebook. I mean, I only go onto Facebook to talk to John, okay, to tell him, he's called me, he's like, I want you to go on AMA. Fine. What's an AMA? I've been trying to keep back my social. I have a family, and I like to spend time with them, and I like the program. At the same time, I am revisiting my drunity.com website and starting to put up, tutorials and how-tos and like little tech blogs. So you can go to drunity.com, and you can also find me on Facebook under Dr. Unity. I will be starting at the beginning of this year to be more proactive on Facebook than, getting stuff done. But just like last night, I was out at the party and I got 3 contracts, within half an hour. I'm like, oh, great. So, but it's fun. I get to work with new technology.
Let's see. Daniel says, John, you're the first guy I know to introduce the whole commitment thing through Unity. Absolutely. Programming in Unity, it's a commitment. If you want to do it as a hobbyist or as a career, you got to work at it. Samuel Arminana. Jonathan, how did you become the Authorized Unity Instructor? Did you reach out to Unity? I did not reach out to Unity. Unity and Udemy formed a partnership and reached out to me. and I happily accepted. That was an awesome opportunity. It gave me a new career, a new job. I was able to leave the casino industry to create content full time. Question, mobile game toots with general modules present like in-app purchase rewarded apps on the way?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Is he asking a question there?
Yeah. The answer is yes. I'll have how to use the social networking aspects of it. You know, whether it's in-app purchasing, whether you are doing level, you know, creating new levels, whether you're going to be pushing it out to Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. Yeah. Now, I see the question about Blender and 3D Studio Max. I actually started on 3D Studio Max version 4 when I was on 4 floppy disk in 1990. I did, and of course, the first thing I built was a TIE Fighter and X-Wing, and I had a little animation of them flying through my house. I had a lot of fun with 3D Studio Max. Obviously, 3D Studio Max is a lot more powerful than it was in 1990, and it's extremely expensive. Blender, I had a student of mine ask me, why aren't more companies using Blender, like, you know, like movie industry companies? Now, I do a lot of, it's like I'll sign so many NDAs. We'll say I work for some very major motion picture companies, and a lot of the times they have a problem. Okay, you know, they have over $100 million into a product. I mean, you know, putting together a movie, and they're stuck on their post, and they got to get an answer to something. You can't call Blender and say, I'm stuck at this, and I need this answer now. Whereas with 3D Studio Max and Maya, they have a phone call that the person will either answer their question or they will write something to fix their problem, because otherwise they're holding up production. So, answer to your question, what do you want to learn? You should learn Blender to understand the mechanics of how 3D models work inside of an interface using vertices and meshes and how light reflects off of them. Okay, but when you get into a company, I guarantee you none of them are probably going to be using Blender. Any real company is not going to be using Blender. They're going to be using Autodesk products because they need that support.
Yeah, and in the indie scene, guys, use Blender. It's free. There's no reason to pay thousands of dollars or a subscription. When you make it to the professional arena, chances are you'll be adapted to 3ds Studio Max or Maya. So, James, we are at the hour mark here, so I want to start wrapping it up here. Everyone, thank you for joining in. I am with Dr. Unity James Simpson. He is the developer of Snarf Quest. The link is in the description for this live stream to download that and buy it on Steam, support him. As well as if you're interested in learning game development, you can take my course, The Ultimate Guide to Game Development. The link with a promotional coupon is in the description of this live event. Any last words, James?
No, man, it's been great. You know, thank you very much for asking me to do this. And
yeah, absolutely.
If you guys want this to happen again, just let me know and we'll try to hook it up.
All right, great. Awesome. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I will see you guys next week.